support, but I know we shall have to really look at so many of the clauses and try and just clean it up so that it is a bill that all of us will appreciate. It will change how we think, how we look at things, how we appreciate our country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the history of Kenya, we know the day we decided that you can do business and you are in the same ministry is the day we killed our country, is the day the culture of corruption entrenched into our country, into our minds, into our thinking, into how we do things daily. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, we have to say that as a country, if you are doing clean business, if you are able to pay your revenues, when I say clean business, Madam Speaker, I go back to what Kibaki had entrenched in this country. During the presidency of Mzee Kibaki, any Kenyan would do a tender. If you're eligible, you will be able to be given that tender. You didn't need to know who is who in an office or anything. Today, Madam Speaker, even when you are starting the tender, you are told you must give something for it to go to the next. And so we have inculcated a behavior that is going to really, even the future of our children is really, really dangerous. So for me, Madam Speaker, as I support, I just want to say this. We must agree that if it is conflict of interest, then indeed it starts from this House, Madam Speaker, because in the departmental committees is where we are doing all these things. But more importantly, we must accept that the directors, and that is why I've always said, Madam Speaker, if we really want to clean up all this mess, then we must agree to go back to performance contracts where there is a job group in the civil service. You must allow them to compete, to be on contracts, and when their contract is over, they can do 2 times and they leave, Madam Speaker. But when you have someone who has worked for 30 years, 35 years, really, it is very, very tough to bring in this law and say we shall be able to clean. We have to start cleaning at a very, very different level, Madam Speaker. I agree with the Honorable Vugenya that indeed it is time. We need to ask ourselves, do we want a better country where everyone can get something and move? Or do we want a country where we shall be counting numbers and saying, these 3 have been able to make billions? You know, in Kenya, I think in East Africa, people get surprised how we talk about billions. We just stand, and it's like a normal thing now in Kenya. But then the most important thing is that this is a bill not really to say that it will target anyone, but it's just a bill to clean up our own mess, Madam Speaker. And if we can agree in this House that indeed we are in a mess and there is need to deal with it, then I believe there can be a few amendments, Madam Speaker, and one of them is, for me, the most important thing is where nowadays we hide so many things in family. If we can clean that up, I don't need to hide if I'm doing a business. Let me do it in a clean way. Let it be gazetted that I did the business, because you're a Kenyan. But this one of saying you'll use a family and the family, that's where the disease is, Madam Speaker. That's where we hide so many things, Madam Speaker. So we need to look at that. I agree that the issue of public officer, the ability to act objectively, I really want to say, as our chair of budget said, that these things start at a very, very different level. So from the director level, Madam Speaker, we need to ask ourselves, let us go the Chinese way, you know, or you do the way EPZs do, that when you are doing something, you pick on one thing and you move. The Chinese, if you are doing a car, it will move on steps and steps, Madam Speaker. By the time you are ending, nobody has credit, because Everyone has touched on it. But with this one, even preparing the whole document, you find a few people are the ones who have prepared the document. And so they know where the nitty-gritty is. They know what you need. They know the specs that you need. They will even send you to China earlier with the specs, even before the tender comes into the papers. So even by the time it is coming, the tender is known is for so and so. So that is where the problem is, Madam Speaker. So, and also, can we do it the Safaricom way then? Put online, when I'm doing a tender, I don't need to know who is there. All I need to do, my first document goes through. If that is correct, it goes. It gives me the second stage. I put my documents, the third stage, until the last stage of my tender. I won't know, I won't do anything. It depends on how I have put my documents. And so that is where our problem is. And you realize, Madam Speaker, one of the things all sectors of government have made sure, even when this House said we will go digital, we do things digital, we are still, there is always a part of manual, Madam Speaker, where then physically you'd have to meet. So I want to say, as members of parliament, it does not mean you have to deny yourself to do business, but you need to do it correctly. You need to be free to people. But you find the person who is still getting the money is a person who has been doing businesses for 50 years. You find someone in Ministry of Health, he has done business since the time of memorial, is still doing that business. One thing we should be saying in this bill, Madam Speaker, is that if you have worked in a ministry, or you are one director or one company that has been there for 20 years, you must leave. That is now the real conflict of interest. What are you doing in this ministry? And it has to happen in all ministries across, that give young people also an opportunity to do these businesses. But if one person is the one doing business, year 1, year 2, 10, 20, Madam Speaker, honestly, it is not also fair. So those are things we need to be saying, even as we talk of conflict of interest. The most important thing we should be saying, and it's not just about EACC. Madam Speaker, even if you call EACC, and I decide also to give EACC the way I saw when I was in the county, you just call officers of EACC, you give them what you are giving, they move on. Some will even be used by others. So all of us as a country, Kenya, we must change the culture in our mind of setting up others, just the way we've set up Anne Jerry. Right now we are telling her she didn't have this document, but nobody is saying, where is the fuel of this businesswoman? That is another conflict of interest. We've decided just to rob this woman, her billion. You can ask me, as a woman, where did you get the billions? How dare you do that to a woman? Just because this woman is not a minister, is not within the cadres of government, or is not even a government official, now you can ask that. Because it's just an ordinary Kenyan who has been doing business. And maybe, Madam Speaker, in that conflict of interest that they have created on Jerry, you will find the money was not for this woman. She is a businesswoman, a smart one. She decided maybe to do it for Uganda, Congo, and any other country. And so this is money for her clients, the other side, Madam Speaker. So even as we speak of that, we must question all our authority officers. And Madam Speaker, all these authorities we put, and we are talking of conflict of interest. We shall find conflict of interest from the time you are starting from revenue, KRA, conflict of interest, POA, conflict of interest. All these authorities are also a cause of this conflict of interest. So, Madam Speaker, even as we look at this, let us look at how many authorities do we have to deal with all this. Do we need all of this? Do we need to litigate everything? Is there a way we can just have a mindset of agreeing our values? Our values. I support Madam Speaker, but I hope we shall amend a few things here, because members of parliament have a right, like any other Kenyan, to do business, but in the right way. I support.
Honorable members, I note there is a lot of interest on this bill. I know it's 10 minutes, but if we keep it short, we'll be able to get as many members to speak. And I can see some lifting their hands. Please don't lift your hands.